Welcome in, Louisiana, to another episode of Odds and Ends. It's our weekend recap show here on bet.nola.com, and it is brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing with Devin Jackson and Jim Derry. What a weekend it was, especially what a Sunday it was for the city of New Orleans, getting to start sports betting Sunday morning at the Harrah's New Orleans Sportsbook, the Caesar Sportsbook there on location, and then watching the Saints get really probably their most memorable victory I don't know, in a long time. Jim, you'd probably be better served to answer this question than me, but at least since a playoff win during one of the later Drew Brees playoff runs, I would think.
Well, I think both wins against Tampa Bay last year were pretty memorable.
Not like this, not in my mind.
38-3 at Tampa Bay is pretty memorable. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously, I talked about it with Jeff Duncan today. It was a must win. I mean, they've had a couple now, maybe even a few, if you want to go that far. If they ever have any chance to successfully defend their back-to-back NFC South Division titles, and they came up with an outstanding game plan. You lose your starting quarterback, and you still find a way to win, and especially with the fact that you're trailing Tom Brady late in the game, then you kick a field goal and you give him the ball back with plenty of time, and your defense comes up with a great play. Yeah, it's certainly up there in the annals of Saints lore as far as the regular season goes. It was huge, and a lot of people didn't expect it, but they found a way to win.
Yeah, it's interesting that I was looking at odds this morning, and we'll have a post up on bet.nola.com later, but their odds have not really changed despite the news today that confirmed Jameis Winston is out for the season. Their odds are in as good or better shape as they were before this week. And part of that is, of course, you beat Tampa Bay. That's a big win. That alters your playoff odds to begin with. But you would think from an odds perspective, from a futures perspective, that would be counterbalanced by losing your starting quarterback. But it really, to a certain extent, doesn't seem to matter who plays quarterback for this team. I mean, of course it does, but they have won games with Taysom Hill at quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, Jameis Winston at quarterback, of course Drew Brees at quarterback. I mean, and now Trevor Siemian. I mean, it's like the defense is good enough, the coaching is good enough, and of course they've got good skill players besides the quarterback to where it just doesn't seem to matter, Devin. I don't know if we lost Devin there.
Well, I'll answer that question.
Yeah, go ahead, dude.
You know why? It's because Aunt Mabel and Drunk Joe and everybody in the bar, they only see what they saw on Sunday. Nothing else matters. I mean, you're talking about what people bet and the weird line that we had this week, Zach. And I mean, I thought it was a strange line, and it really had a lot to do with them looking terrible against Seattle, because normally that line would have been a 3 to 3.5 point line, and then everybody would have been jumping on Tampa Bay. But it's what have you done for me lately? And the Saints beat Tampa Bay, and they don't. The average bettor doesn't care who's playing quarterback.
That was some inception stuff right there. Devin was over on that side of the screen, and now he popped up in the middle, and he's back. And we'll get Devin's thoughts on the Saints in a minute. But I did want to say it's also a big day for us here at Odds and Ends. We're pleased to have Trey Wingo joining the show a little later, in just a few minutes, actually. And he is, of course, the former ESPN SportsCenter anchor and is now the Chief Trends Officer for Caesar Sportsbook. And so Trey will be joining us to give his thoughts on the NFL, the Saints, and the LSU coaching search and various other points to discuss with him. So, but Devin, now that you're back, your thoughts on that Saints win. I mean, I know you're new to town, obviously a little bit more of an outsider perspective, 10,000-foot view on the Saints, but like it just doesn't seem to matter for this team. They find ways to win.
Yeah, they're one of those teams that it doesn't matter the odds stacked against them or the situation. They find a way to win these types of games every year that they have no business winning. And just a testament to the coaching staff, Sean Payton, he always has the Saints ready to play in big games. And this is like I think the fifth or sixth different starting quarterback since 2019 that Sean Payton has won a game with. So, I mean, it just seems like it does not matter who's in at quarterback or, what's the situation surrounding the receivers or all the questions that we always have about the Saints. They always find a way to win. And yesterday was a perfect example. Watched the game from Harrah's yesterday, and it was crazy. A lot of fans from all types of teams, Saints fans. There was a few Bucks fans at the bar that I was watching the game at, and they were very loud up until that interception, and then you couldn't hear a word from them. So it was a very entertaining game, and one that we should have expected on Halloween.
I maintain that outside of being at the actual stadium, the best place to watch a big game is at a sports book. It's bars are fine. Sports bars are great. Restaurants are great. Being at home with your family and friends is great. But being at a sports book and seeing the emotions, and the added bonus of being at a sports book is even if the game is not competitive, there's usually still some sort of bet up in the air, whether it's a total or whether it's a big spread or there's some other game and somebody is sweating something somewhere. And the emotion that you can view just as like a people watcher at a sports book is fantastic. So we finally got to do that at Harrah's yesterday, and the rest of the state is coming. L'Auberge in Baton Rouge opens its sports book today, as does Boomtown Casino in Harvey. There are some other sports books I know. The Isle of Capri in Lake Charles, I think, is next week or November the 10th, I want to say it is. And then some of the other books will open. And then we'll have mobile betting pretty soon too, which is just the whole other level, because that was really one thing that was missing from Harrah's yesterday. You had to stand in line, and because it's still a temporary sports book, the line got awfully long. And I know there were people, I was in there right before 12 o'clock, and there were people in line who were not going to have a chance to bet on those 12 o'clock NFL games because they would have long since started by the time they got to the front of the line. So, but it was a great weekend. Let's talk a few results. First, in college football, and LSU had the week off. The big game of the day was the battle for the state of Michigan, and this was a wildly entertaining game too. Michigan had I want to say it was a 30-14 lead. They had a 16-point lead in the third quarter, and with Michigan's defense, you kind of think at that point, a 16-point lead for Michigan's more like maybe a 25-point lead for most teams, because they haven't given up a lot of points. They haven't given up a lot of yards. And yet Michigan State just kept throwing haymakers at them. Kenneth Walker busted a couple of big runs. They made some plays in the passing game. Michigan's offense stagnated, and all of a sudden it was Sparty at the end who had the victory.
2 words: Jim Harbaugh. He's just not good against ranked teams, and it doesn't matter what the score is. He finds ways to lose. I'm not sure how long can you keep a guy like that there at Michigan, because Michigan's a lot like LSU. They don't put up with those kinds of things, and it certainly would be interesting to see if he survives, if they lose to Ohio State again. And, I mean, will they accept mediocrity? Because that's basically what Michigan is at this point. I mean, sure, they're ranked. They'll finish in the top 15 probably, but is that good enough to be the Wolverines coach? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, they could very easily, even with a loss to Ohio State, be 10-2 and be a New Year's Six candidate. And I think you're probably okay if you're Harbaugh at that point. But you're right, the overall trend is just not good. The overall trend is very good for Georgia. This was this was like a 14.5 point spread, 14.5. And Georgia was only up 3-0 with 3 minutes left in the first half, and it looked like they were actually going to get a game for the first time all season. And then it was almost like watching one of those peak Alabama teams under Nick Saban, where it's a close game and you think, man, we're finally going to get to see them challenged. And then 2 minutes later, it was 24-zip. They scored, got a turnover, scored again, got a pick six. Boom, 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 game over. And Devin, that's really what Georgia has done all year.
Yeah, they dominated all year, just playing really solid defense, and it looked like Florida was going to make the game very interesting, make it very competitive. But Georgia did what they did at the end of halves and the start of third quarters. They pretty much put their opponents to sleep. They have that knockout blow, and the knockout blow for this game was the 3 touchdowns right before halftime. So Georgia continues to be the best team in the country. I don't think it's that close. I think Alabama maybe in that conversation too, but Georgia seems like clearly the best team, even without a potent offense.
Yeah, and interesting in those last 3 results you see there, the sharp money was on Auburn, and it worked out there for bettors who are following the sharp money. And it was also on Penn State to a certain extent with the 18.5. But it doesn't always work out that way, because the sharp money was on North Carolina, and Notre Dame took care of the Tar Heels. And so it's interesting to follow those things from a betting perspective. But the favorites do win all of those games, only Ohio State not getting the cover. So at this point, let's welcome on to the show Trey Wingo, former ESPN SportsCenter anchor, and he is now the Chief Trends Officer for Caesars Sportsbook. And Trey, thanks for joining us.
Hey, man, happy to be with you. What a weekend it was down in New Orleans with gaming finally open for Caesars and the Caesars Superdome rocking for only the second time this year after all the misplaced things that the Saints had to go through because of the hurricanes. And just an amazing win for the Saints. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, it's been quite a weekend here, and we were just saying before you got on, the second best place in New Orleans to watch that game yesterday was Harrah's. If you weren't at the Superdome, you wanted to be at Harrah's with all that emotion, with betting, with everybody totally invested in the game. And I know you've been going around the country with Caesars and as sort of an ambassador for them as they launch these sports books everywhere. What has that been like, and what's stuck out to you about that process?
It's been fun. Best way to describe it. It's been great, and the reaction has been amazing. Look, I think that the action yesterday at Harrah's, the money on the Saints was 30 times the number bet on the Bucks in that one game alone on Sunday, which just shows you how passionate Saints fans are. And to see the place going nuts, and clearly the defense fed off that yesterday inside the Caesars Superdome, and having Mark Ingram back where he belongs, quite frankly. Like, I know he had a couple good years with the Ravens, but he's a Saint, man. And to have him come back and do that, and to see Trevor Siemian basically down to your third string quarterback. I mean, it was the backup weekend show, right? That's what it was on Sunday with Cooper Rush and Mike White setting all kinds of records for the Jets in an offense where Zach Wilson couldn't find anything to get going. He puts up 30-plus points, throws for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. Absolutely impressive. But really, that was the guttiest win I saw yesterday, was what the Saints were able to do against arguably the best team in football in Tampa Bay. I know they didn't have Antonio Brown, and Gronk played limited action, but that was just a massive, massive win for Sean Payton and company.
And we another thing we mentioned, Sean Payton has won games now in the last, just going back 3 years. Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, of course, Drew Brees, and now Trevor Siemian. At what point does Payton start getting some Coach of the Year love? I mean, if you look at the futures, he's still kind of a long shot.
It just shows you how crazy, by the way, the thing that you just talked about is, because Jameis Winston's going to get credit for that win because he started. Okay. Like that's the way it works. He's going to get the win because he started the game. This is why wins are not a quarterback stat. They will never be a quarterback stat. And we need to stop pretending like they are a quarterback stat. I don't understand the NFL's affection, passionate, just whatever, with the idea of whoever starts the game gets credited for the win and whoever starts the game gets credited for the loss, because none of that makes any sense to me whatsoever. But yeah, Sean Payton should be getting a lot of love for Coach of the Year. I mean, just think about the transition that he's gone through. Okay, under Drew Brees, throw it, and then run it occasionally. Well, what are we doing with Jameis Winston now? And now whoever is going to be, I think it's probably going to be Taysom when he's cleared to come back from concussion. But now they're 31st in passing offense, and they're still 5-2 on the season. I mean, that tells you. Look, Bill Belichick had a thing. He always wanted to win a bunch of different ways, right? If they felt like he could win with those Patriots teams a bunch of different ways, he felt they had a real good chance to be Super Bowl champs. And the Saints have completely transformed their offense from last year to this year. And they are a run-first team, protect the football, and rely on that great defense, which is a complete 180 from what they've been for most of the time when Drew Brees and Sean Payton were together on the sidelines and on the field. So it is absolutely imperative that Sean Payton should be in the discussion now for a Coach of the Year.
Trey, Jim Derry here. Just talk a little bit about what do you see for the Saints the rest of the year? Obviously, tough to figure out with the quarterback situation and who will play, whether it'll be Taysom Hill, whether it be Trevor Siemian, more likely Taysom Hill. But does this change your, even though with the big win yesterday, does it change your opinion on what they could possibly do the rest of the year?
Well, it does, obviously, but to me, it doesn't as much. And I'll tell you why, because they weren't counting on Jameis to win games, right? They weren't telling him go out there and win the game. they basically were saying, let's not lose the game. I mean, we all know what Jameis has been since he came into the league, 2015. He has the most interceptions and the most multiple interception games in the NFL. I mean, that's who he is. And Sean Payton has done, and the coaching staff has done a great job this year of sort of rewiring his brain, right? And say, let's take the crazy play out and let's keep the good plays in, and let's not make mistakes that cost us games, because we all know that more games are lost than won. That is a fact in the NFL. That you just try and let the other team make the most mistakes, and usually you're going to come away with a victory. Now, I would be, if I were the Saints, I would be very intrigued with one name out there, and that's Cam Newton. I would be really interested to see if they would think about going down that road because of what we've talked about. We don't want to bring in someone that's going to wing it all over the field. We want someone that's going to give us a little energy, little dynamic threat maybe on with the arm and the legs. And I just think Cam would be a really interesting fit in New Orleans right now with the potential for Jameis. It looks like he's done for the year, and what else you have. And we always talk about scheme, right? Well, if you have Taysom Hill and Cam Newton, like they're sort of the same. They sort of do the same things. I think it would be very interesting to how Sean Payton would manage both of those quarterbacks in and out of the lineup.
Having played against him for many years, that would be quite the interesting marriage after you fight your tail off to beat a guy for
the only thing that matters is wins, man. Marriages can be dissolved and be reconstructed many, many times over in this league. Can you find a way to win?
The Saints went from cheering for Teddy Bridgewater to competing against him the very next year, so it's not like it would be new to this franchise. Let's throw up some other key results from last NFL, I guess yesterday, NFL results. It feels like it's been more than a day already. Having been in the Dome, that felt like 2 days by itself. But Trey, I mean, the NFL is totally unpredictable. We know that. That's why the sports books make so much money on it, frankly. But you talked about backup weekend. I mean, I look at the Steelers beating the Browns as one I didn't see coming. Even the Panthers and Falcons seemed like they were going in opposite direction, and Carolina wins. Make sense of this for us.
I can't. It's football, right? Like the Tennessee Titans, they're dealing with a massive injury right now. But the Tennessee Titans have beaten the Colts, they've beaten the Bills, and they've beaten the Chiefs in 3 straight weeks, and they lost to the Jets. You can't make sense of it, right? You can't. Football is just crazy that way. And, now the Tennessee Titans are in a world of hurt because at a minimum, I think Derrick Henry's out 8, probably 10 weeks if he comes back at all this year. So, they have the best record in the AFC right now, and they have the largest lead in the NFL, largest lead in the AFC at 3 games in their division, and they're potentially in real trouble because of the injury. The 2 teams that I think have been the most consistent, that have been the 3 teams rather than been the most consistent throughout this entire season. Well, now I'm going to say 4 have been the Dallas Cowboys, the Green Bay Packers, the Arizona Cardinals. And am I missing anybody? Tampa Bay lost yesterday, so I'll take them down a peg. But the Dallas Cowboys have won 6 straight games, and they did a magnificent job going up against the Vikings on the road with their backup quarterback. Green Bay has not lost since getting blown out by the Saints in Week 1. And this is why it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, because I was told after Week 1 that Aaron Rodgers looked disinterested and he didn't care anymore. Well, when he scored against the Bears a few weeks ago and yelled, "I own you" to all the Bears fans, sure looks a hell of a lot like he cared to me. And on Thursday night, with no receivers on the road against the only unbeaten team in the NFL, throwing his body around to try and get into the end zone and having the internet meme his helmet up here, sure looked like a hell of a lot like he cared to me. So this is the thing about the NFL. It is a week-to-week league, man. And like the Tennessee Titans are going to find out real quickly how good they're going to be without arguably their best player, or the player that I would say is more important to his team than any other one player in the NFL. And so it's great that they're 6-2 and have a 3-game lead, but their world's about to change dramatically because of Derrick Henry being out. So you can't make sense of it. You just buckle up and go for the ride. And that's why the NFL, I think, is so interesting and fascinating year in and year out.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Okay.
Go ahead, Devin. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll jump in. How you doing, Trey? And talk about kind of the NFC. I know you talked about the AFC. Rams made a big move today, got Von Miller.
You think? You think that's a big move?
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on how do you think the NFC will shape up, kind of with that move, and then the NFC West between the Cardinals and Rams seems like a two-headed race to see who can finish on top.
Well, look, the NFC West is a very, very tough division. But you could have made the very convincing argument to me that the Rams were the best team in the NFC before that trade. And I know people will say, well, wait a minute, they lost to the Cardinals. You're right, they did. They had a bad game, and Kyler Murray played great. Totally understand that. Top to bottom, that offense with that defense, they were pretty good before they got Aaron Donald, or excuse me, before they got Von Miller. But now they have Von Miller. And here's what's fascinating. Since Von came into the league in 2011, he has the most sacks in the NFL over that time frame. I can't was Donald 13 or 14? I can't remember. When Aaron Donald came into the league, since that time frame, he has the most sacks in the NFL since he started in the NFL. So now you have Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and a bunch of other playmakers on defense. Meanwhile, on the offense, you have Matthew Stafford, who's playing like an MVP, Cooper Kupp, who's playing like Jerry Rice and Randy Moss rolled into one, a really deep receiving core, a really good running game despite the loss of Cam Akers to start the season. And, anything's possible now. Last year, Tampa Bay was the first team to ever play a home game in the Super Bowl and win it. Well, SoFi is where the Super Bowl is going to be this year. And I don't know if the Rams will ever have much of a home field advantage because it's just not a thing in Los Angeles. But you'd be hard-pressed to try and convince me otherwise that the Rams right now aren't the best team in football.
You mentioned that Jameis Winston going down yesterday and the Saints winning was the buzz of the NFL at like 6 o'clock yesterday. By 11 o'clock this morning, it's like the fifth biggest story. And that's the NFL in a nutshell right there.
It absolutely is. They keep you entertained. They keep you interested. And I got to say this, though, was two things that drove me crazy yesterday. And one was, well, they were both significant games. Okay, the play in the Jets-Bengals game, 3rd and 11, if the Bengals play defense, they get the ball back, they're probably going to get the game-winning score, right? They call the defender on leading with his helmet on the receiver, Braxton Berrios. Well, if you look at the replay, Berrios lowers his head, then the defender lowers his head. So I don't know how you differentiate between who you're going to call that on, whether it's the receiver, the offensive player, or the defensive player. To me, at best, that's a non-call and we move on. Although the NFL has said more specifically over the last couple of years, hey, we're going to make the offense just as responsible, the offensive player just as responsible about this as we do the defensive player. That changed that game dramatically. I get it. The Bengals probably never should have been in that position against the Jets. You're 100% right. They couldn't stop Mike White. That's on them 100%. But that play changed the outcome of that game. And they called it against the defender. Now let's go to the Steelers-Browns game, okay? They try the fake field goal, and Chris Boswell is throwing it. Now, he's throwing it. He's not a quarterback, but he is throwing the football. Under the rules of the NFL now, he has passer protection. It's not a quarterback rule. It's a man throwing the football. So whether you're a punter, a kicker, a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, hell, an offensive lineman, anybody that's throwing the football has protection. Go back and look at what Harrison did to him on that play. He led with the crown of his helmet right under his chin, concussed, out for the game, could have cost the Steelers the game because they didn't have a kicker. And at one point after a penalty going for it, for a 2-point conversion, they had to do it from the 12-yard line. They found a way to win the game. They call it on the defender in the Jets-Bengals game where it shouldn't have been called, in my opinion. And they don't call anything on what was a blatant leading with the crown of your helmet. He's going to get a fine this week from the NFL. I just don't understand the maddening inconsistency.
Trey, there was also a play, and I can't remember what game it was, but it stuck out to me that a running back took a handoff. He rolled out to his right. He was going to throw the football. Instead of taking a loss, he threw it away, like quarterbacks can do. Yeah. And that was the right call. I didn't even realize that running backs could do that. But it goes to your point to show that you're right. If they're a passer, they're supposed to be under the same rules as everybody, as a quarterback or anybody else.
Yeah, and Boswell got lit up, man. I mean, that
really did.
That was as blatant as you can see. And they just didn't call it because he was a kicker, right? You can, if that was Baker Mayfield or Patrick Mahomes or Ben Roethlisberger or Jameis Winston, they're calling that play 100 times out of 100. But because they don't consider him a passer, they just say, it's just a kicker. Well, it almost cost the Steelers the game. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm really angry because, I don't know what the injury update is on him. He was spitting out blood. He might have a broken jaw. So we don't know whether or not he's going to be available going forward for them. And he's a pretty good kicker. So, yeah, I would be really upset if I were the Steelers over the non-call on that play.
I think overall there has been an inconsistency in calling personal fouls. And, you look at the Saints game yesterday in particular, there was a play where Golston clearly hits Simeon late and they call it, but he did it with his helmet off. It didn't just come off by itself. To me, that should have been offsetting penalties, but just
hands
overall.
To the face, absolutely. Yeah, listen, you're 100% right. Like, I believe that was Troy was calling that game, right? Aikman was calling that game, right? Yesterday. Yes. And he was like, really? They called that a penalty, roughing the passer? I mean, he did shove him in the back, kind of, maybe sort of, but hey, I mean, if you're a Saints fan, you'll love it and you'll take it, but you're right. His helmet didn't come off by itself. It had to find a way to get itself off there. And that was probably a hands to the face that they missed. Look, there's a former referee who now works for a network. That we were once somewhere having dinner. And he said to me, I thought we were really good at what we did until I saw the game the way that you guys see it. I'm like, we're terrible. And that's why I think the sky judge thing is, if we can ever get that rule implemented, let's get a sky judge to see the game the way that you and I see it watching it on television. Let's go back to that infamous NFC Championship game between the Rams and the Saints a few years ago. If there's a sky judge watching that game, they would absolutely buzz down and say, hey, man, you have to call that PI. You have to call that PI. And that changed that game dramatically. It's probably the reason the Rams went to the Super Bowl and the Saints didn't. So I'm very hopeful that sooner rather than later, this damn sky judge thing will be taken care of.
And now you're just bringing up bad memories. Now we just lost all of our audience. But
now let's go back to the 80s with the bags over our heads. Come on, 1980. Let's go.
Not probably, Trey. Not probably.
But what you're talking about, Trey, and the sky judge maybe is a good compromise. And this is not just a football problem because the who was it? The Red Sox and the Rays in the baseball playoffs. You had that ground rule double where the outfielder kicks the ball over the wall. It was accidental, but what's stopping an outfielder from doing that? Oh, I did it accidentally.
My bad. On me. My bad.
Yeah, the run was going to score. And what we've done is we're trying to legislate all common sense out of everything, where everything's got to be exactly by the rules, and the referees or the umpires don't have the ability to say, no, in this particular specific situation, that makes no sense. And so I'm going to call it the way that it should be called.
Yeah, listen, the old argument was, and Mike Holmgren used to say this all the time, if everyone at a bar watching it can tell it's a fumble, it's a bleeping fumble, right? Like we tend to overcomplicate this thing. And I want to be clear. I think the NFL refs are in a terrible position because they're asked to do so much so quickly and process all this information. Let's help them. That's why I think the idea of the sky judge would really be helpful for them. It's not saying you're not good enough. It's saying we want to make sure that you have all the information. Like, they don't see things the way we see them. It is so much more difficult to look at it on a linear level while you're playing the game, as opposed to an overview level where you and I watch the game. It would make the game so much better. It would make the game better officiated. It would make controversial calls be so much more understandable that a fan base may be upset about it, but they'd say, yeah, there's no way I can argue that. It's right in front of my face.
Yeah, no, I agree. Before you go, Trey, we want to get your thoughts on a couple of other things. We'll start with LSU football, and since we have no audience left anyway, we're free to do this, but they're playing Alabama this week. It's a 28.5-point spread, and I don't know that anyone's really going to take the Tigers in the points because how do you know they're not just going to get boat raced in this game? But did you ever think over the last 10, 15, 20 years that an LSU-Alabama game would have a 28.5-point spread?
Well, first of all, no, never. I mean, those games were always competitive. But see, here's the thing, and this is going to really sting some people in the Bayou again. It just makes you appreciate how good Nick Saban is at what he does. Because that LSU team, as we're seeing in the NFL with the way Joe Burrow's played, Justin Jefferson, and now Jamar Chase, my God, Caleb Chason, Patrick Queen, all these guys are playing really, really well at the NFL level. That team was loaded for bear, and it's probably going to go down as the single greatest college football season put together of all time. The number of ranked teams they beat, how they beat them, the margin of victory, all that kind of stuff. And LSU and Ed Orgeron was able to do that one time. This is the beauty of Nick Saban. Like, Dabo's had a really good run, and Clemson is not good in any way, shape, or form this year. Saban's ability to reload and rebuild almost every year, whether you love him or hate him, and I know most people listening probably hate him right now, you have to respect the abilities he's had to never come to the game empty, never come into a season without talent. He is always, always loaded for bear, and that's the hardest thing in the world to do. You can do it once, and that's great, and we saw the magic with Ed Orgeron in that season. But at the end of the day, Alabama's in it year in and year out because of what Saban is able to do.
Do you see anyone being able to beat Georgia?
Well, are they going to score on Georgia? Right? I mean, I think they have more interceptions than touchdowns allowed. It's absolutely ridiculous how strong their defense is this year. Listen, I've seen some really crazy stuff, for lack of a better term, from Kirby Smart going up against Alabama in a couple of games. And like, what are you doing? Why are you putting on Justin Fields with a fake punt scenario? What's happening here? So nothing would surprise me, but Georgia is far and away the best team in college football this year. And I don't think it's close.
Scott Woodward has a history, just going back to LSU for a minute, of making these splash hires. He hired Chris Peterson at Washington. He hired Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, Buzz Williams for basketball at Texas A&M. Even in the year and a half he's been at LSU, he hired Kim Mulkey for women's basketball. Yeah. Who do you see him targeting here? I mean, who would realistically come to Baton Rouge?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because Ed's ability to connect with the people of Louisiana and connect with the players in state was incredible. Like, it really, really was. That was his charm, his ace in the hole. You're going to have someone that can relate to the way that he was able to relate to those people, and find these players and make them feel like, hey, this is ours. This is our state. This is our community. This is our place. We need to protect this place. I think that's the first and foremost. Look, he should shoot for everybody. Like, there's no reason not to go after everybody. You think of the biggest names possible, whether they're coaching at another school in college or they're coaching at in the NFL. There is no reason there should be no limits to how far he should think about this. You need a splash hire, but more importantly, you need someone that's going to be able to do the things that we're talking about with Alabama and Clemson and Kirby to some degree with what he's been able to do at Georgia. You need to find someone that's going to be able to bring in that talent consistently year in and year out.
Yeah, when we have heard big names, I mean, we've heard Dabo's name mentioned. I don't think that's realistic. We've heard Lincoln Riley.
There's no reason not to go and talk to him.
He's going to swing.
There's no reason not to talk to Nick Saban. All right, let's just be honest about it. Okay, why not? He's coached there before. He's won a championship before. There's no reason to not pick up the phone. There's absolutely no reason to not dial a number and see if they'll answer.
It's one of the best jobs in the country, and so no one's going to laugh you away, in other words.
Correct. They're going to take the phone call, unless you're Mike Tomlin.
Even he might and just be angry about it.
Nope. Don't think that's going to happen. I think he's pretty clear about where he wants to be.
Did you sell encyclopedias as a kid or something? Calling Nick Saban? I mean, come on. You're not afraid to ask anybody anything.
What's the downside to making that phone call? Tell me. Give me the downside. I'm going to listen to the downside.
I'm not saying there's a downside.
There is. That's why you make the phone call. There's no downside to it for you.
If you got the Cheetos to call Nick Saban and ask him if he wants to be the coach at LSU, go ahead.
If you're the AD of LSU, you better have those Cheetos, right? You better. That's the job.
Right.
James Carville, who is friends with Scott Woodward, by the way, told us last week I'm not going to do a James Carville voice. I wish I could, but he said he is going to call Nick Saban, if for nothing else than to get his opinion on some other candidates. I mean, he will talk to him. So
there's no shooter shoot, man. Shooter shoot. He's got to shoot.
Let's talk quickly about tonight's game, a Monday night game, and not of great interest to the Saints or what we're talking about, but just because this is a Monday show and we'll talk about Monday Night Football. It's in Kansas City. The Giants are 10.5-point dogs. I don't know, Trey, the Chiefs have got to turn it around at some point, and this seems like as good of a spot as any.
Listen, there's a great untrue narrative about the Kansas City Chiefs that we need to sort of dispel. I think we've all come to the conclusion over the first 8 weeks of the season, which will conclude tonight, that anybody can have a bad game, right? The Titans lost to the Jets, right? We just talked about that. And they might be the best team of football right now. That's changed, obviously, with the Derrick Henry injury. The point is, anybody can lay a stinker. And the Chiefs last Sunday laid a stinker against the Titans. But you know what they weren't doing before that? Laying stinkers. And everybody's trying to refigure out the Chiefs' offense. It's like, oh, my God, the NFL has figured out Patrick Mahomes. Please. Let's just dispel with that garbage right now. Because going into the Titans game, do you know what the Chiefs' offensive numbers were through the first 6 weeks of the season? They were scoring more points per game, more yards per game, converting at a higher third down rate, and a higher red zone touchdown rate than either of their previous 2 years when they went to Super Bowls back-to-back and won Super Bowl 54. The only difference? They can't hold on to the football. It's that simple. So for everybody trying to re-examine and sort of dissect the Chiefs offense because they want to have a splashy take, you're doing yourself and everybody a disservice. If they hold on to the football, they beat the Ravens. If they don't lose the turnover battle 4-0 to the Chargers, they absolutely beat the Chargers. If they don't give it away again against Buffalo, they probably beat Buffalo. So the only thing up until Sunday that has beaten the Chiefs has been the Chiefs. I fully expect that to not be the case against the New York Giants team that has lost 8 straight primetime games.
What was your preseason Super Bowl pick, and what would it be if you had to pick it today?
Well, I started the season saying that I would not be surprised if we had a rematch between the Chiefs and the Bucs, and that's only happened once. It was the Cowboys and the Bills in Super Bowls 27 and Super Bowls 28. I still think the Bucs have a decent shot to get there, and quite frankly, I think that the Chiefs still have a really good chance to get there, especially with the injury to Derrick Henry in Tennessee. I think that the Chiefs can hang with Buffalo. They should have beaten Baltimore. Now, I get it. You are what your record says you are. I'm not saying that they didn't lose the game. They lost the game. But if I'm Kansas City, as long as I get 1 or 2 stops from a horrible defense, I'm going to trust Patrick Mahomes. Now, I will say this at this point, you'd probably be safe to say the Rams are probably the favorite or the Cowboys to represent the NFC. The AFC is wide open right now. The AFC, to me, is still absolutely wide open. I believe it's Caesars right now. The Bills are the prohibitive favorites at plus 550 to get there. But again, the Chiefs started the year, I think, at plus 250 or plus 350. So it just shows you that there's not one team in the AFC that everybody's saying, yeah, they're going to be that team right now.
Trey, before we let you go, I think sports betting will be legal in more than half of the states in the country by the end of next year, I believe I read. What does the next year hold for Caesars in your eyes, and where do we go as this thing really continues to get big?
Well, I don't understand why every state isn't legalizing sports gambling. Like, we saw the action that came into Harrah's over the weekend. You've seen what the state of New Jersey and the amount of revenue they've pulled since they were one of the first to legalize gambling. The numbers have been astronomical. If states want to make money, legalize sports gambling. And I want to be 100% clear about this. I said that before I signed with Caesars. I've said that for years. I think a few other things should be legalized too, but that's a separate discussion we can have at another time. But if you want to make money for your state, and oh, by the way, like, for example, Connecticut, where I live, just legalized it last month because every state that surrounded us, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, they were all legal gambling states, legal sports gambling. So Connecticut people were literally leaving the state to go give their money somewhere else. We're in the top of the first inning here in this brand new world where sports gambling is going to be legal everywhere. And that's the fun part about it for me as a content guy, to find ways to create things with a blank canvas, for lack of a better term. Now, again, I don't understand why everybody isn't on board with this, because it's going to happen, and you just have to decide whether you want to generate revenue from it or not.
I'm on board with that. I'm on board with that. That's Trey Wingo. He's here with us on the Odds and Ends today on bet.nola.com. Trey, come back and see us sometime, huh?
You got it. And on behalf of Caesars, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you, Trey. That's Trey Wingo. This is Odds and Ends, and we'll wrap things up here as we move forward into the next week of football season. We talked briefly about it with Trey, guys, but the college football lines for the week to come, LSU's a 28.5-point underdog, which would seem surprising, except that they were huge underdogs at times last year too. So Jim, I guess we can't be surprised at this point.
No, I mean, I got to be honest that I was surprised it was this low. I just don't, we can talk about it, who we're going to pick on Thursday and all that sort of thing. But, which LSU are you going to get? Are you going to get the one that cares and comes out and plays like they played against Florida? Or are you going to get the one that lays an egg? Because if you get the one that lays an egg, I got a feeling, Nick Saban's going to be looking – he's not usually one that runs up a score. But in this case, not because it's LSU, but because he's now going to have to look for style points going forward, especially if they were to lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game, if assuming he makes it. But I think Alabama's going to be going for style points, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets a 28-point lead, will he keep on going?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you say that we could get the LSU version that cares and plays hard, but let's say we get that for the first quarter and a half, and it's still 24-7 Alabama. Are they going to care for the last 2.5 quarters? I mean, they're so much better that even if you get the good version of LSU, they're a shell of what they were even at the beginning of this season, right?
Well, that's true, but I don't necessarily think that Alabama's as good as everybody else thinks they are. And I'd be interested to hear and I'm sure I will, what Devin thinks, because he's the one that I think he's missed like 2 picks all year in college football. But I just don't think – I don't think Alabama is the same Alabama team that they've been. And so I do think it matters if the LSU that cares shows up, because I'm not saying they can win, although I think it was the money line was something like super absurd. And I don't think that they can win, but I do think that they could make a realistic game out of it and maybe stay within 2 touchdowns if they play their best football.
Yeah, I think the money line's in the 20-1 neighborhood. So
yeah, that's
if you really want to take a swing at it. But Devin, Jim sets you up there. When you look at these lines, whether it's LSU or one of the other games, what do you see that sticks out to you?
I think the Ole Miss Liberty line is too low. I think their sports bears are giving Liberty a little bit too much credit. I know they have a quarterback in Malik Willis. He used to play for Auburn, and he's being talked about as potentially a first or second round quarterback in the draft. But Liberty's team, they're not good. They lost to UL Monroe, and that's not a good football team either. So I thought the line was going to come in at least 14.5, not 9.5. I know Ole Miss is coming off a loss, and Matt Corral's a little banged up, but that line is just way too low for my liking. So I'm probably taking Ole Miss now, and I'll take Ole Miss even if it goes up to 10. I just don't think this is going to be as close as a game as they think, because Ole Miss just has simply better talent than Liberty.
It's a fascinating game. I mean, Hugh Freeze coming back to Oxford. Usually these November non-conference SEC games are the worst because come on, guys, it's November, play important games. But this one to me is just fascinating. And then another really interesting line, Wake Forest undefeated, and North Carolina has been, I mean, quite frankly, extremely disappointing. One of the more disappointing teams in the country. They were top 10 preseason. They were in a New Year's Six Bowl last year. They're like 4-5, but they're favored against Wake Forest. So this is another one. It's kind of like Wisconsin has been one of the bookies' favorites all year long, and North Carolina is in that boat. And then Michigan State only a 3-point favorite at Purdue after the big win.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Hold on, Zach. I'm texting my friend right now. Devin just said to go take give the 9.5. So I'm trying to get him to get the Harrahs as soon as he can before it gets to 10.
Yeah, get there now. Place that bet.
Take it now.
It's Monday afternoon. The line's probably not too bad right now.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on the Michigan State Purdue game, I think they're giving Purdue a little bit of credit here. I know they beat Iowa a couple weeks ago and have looked like a pretty decent team. Also, Michigan State could be coming in off a letdown. I mean, that's an intriguing game to me because this is a classic Big Ten game where you're coming off a big win, and then you roll into a road game. I wouldn't say it's an incredibly tough place to play, but it's not easy. And you're playing against a Purdue team that's already got to win against a top 10 team this year when Iowa was at number 2. So Michigan State could be on upset alert this week and could be in jeopardy, but I expect Kenneth Walker and them to find a way to pull it out.
Yeah, Purdue is rolling right now. You're right about that. They're one of the hotter teams in the country that nobody's really talking about. And then that Auburn A&M game, it's kind of an elimination game. Obviously, Alabama is rolling in the SEC West right now, but whoever loses that game is out of the SEC West race. And whoever wins, especially if it's Auburn, still has a chance. I mean, we're at the point where you guys remember this. LSU had a lead on Auburn after 3 quarters, probably should have been up on them more than they were. And now all of a sudden Auburn looks like they are the top challenger to Alabama in the SEC West, particularly if they can win in College Station this weekend. That will set up an Iron Bowl that is yet again for the SEC West title. And if, I believe that game's in Auburn this year. And so if you're Alabama, I don't think you like that idea very much. So
I think that, is Ole Miss, you're starting to have to compare teams and who they played now. And I'm just not sure that Ole Miss is as good as we thought they were. Kind of like they just didn't fade off as quickly as Arkansas. But remember 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were talking about Arkansas maybe being one of the best teams in the country. And look how quick we forgot about them. So I think Ole Miss is an also ran. I know Rebels fans don't want to hear that, but too bad. I think, and I don't want to give any picks away, but Texas A&M, Auburn, that spread to me seems a little off. I think Texas A&M could be a big play this weekend.
Yeah, the A&M is playing well too. I mean, and just to your point about Ole Miss, it is so difficult, or Arkansas, it is so difficult to win games without a balanced team. And Arkansas is sort of all defense and struggles on offense on times, and Ole Miss we know is all offense and struggles on defense at times. It's hard to get through a 12-game season, especially in the SEC where you have 7 or 8 of those 12 games are really tough. It's hard to win games like that. You have to at least have, yes, LSU in 2019 had the best offense in the history of the world. They still had times when the defense had to step up and make a stop. I mean, they did, and the defense was able to do that. So, you have to have both. Looking ahead to the NFL, week 9, is it? No, week 8. Week 8.
Week 9.
No, it is week 9. See, time's flying, man. Time is flying. Yeah. The Saints, it's interesting. They were in the look-ahead line for this game before yesterday's game. They were 5-point favorites. That line's moved to 5.5, even though Jameis Winston obviously will not be starting for the Saints. Now, having said that, the Saints beat the Bucs. The Falcons look terrible against the Panthers, so that has to do with it too. But Jim, you're our resident NFL expert. What do you see from the Saints and then from these other games here too?
This is the trap of all traps. And again, I don't like giving away picks on Monday. This is not a good spot for the Saints at all. I mean, they went to Seattle and prepared for 2 weeks for Tampa Bay. Obviously, looked terrible against Seattle, but still found a way to win. The Falcons are having all kinds of issues themselves. But I mean, if people have long memories, they can remember a couple of years ago a 2-8 Falcons team coming into the Dome. The Saints were flying high. They were on a winning streak, and the Falcons just straight up beat them. So, I mean, this series is always unpredictable, but this spread's going to go up. I know that we don't know who the quarterback's going to be yet. I would guess this is a Taysom Hill kind of game. So if he's even kind of ready to go, you'll see a lot of Taysom Hill. But if this spread gets up to 6 or 6.5, just wait until Sunday. See how high it goes. If you don't want to bet against the Saints, don't bet this game at all.
Yeah, other interesting games there. The Cardinals favored on the road by 2.5 in Santa Clara County, California. But that I think we know that's a tough spot for the Cardinals too. They do have a few days of extra rest, and then the Chiefs favored on Sunday Night Football against Green Bay. No, that's an afternoon game. The Sunday Night Football game is Titans and Rams,
Right.
and I have to admit I did not see the look-ahead line for this game, but after the Derrick Henry news, it has popped up that the Rams are now laying more than a touchdown.
I think it was 4. It was in the range of 4. But the one that intrigues me is the Cardinals line, because I don't know how healthy is Kyler Murray. No one, with all the stuff that's been going on, no one's really talking about that. But he clearly was banged up even before that last play where he had a tough time getting up. So, I don't want to overreact to the Niners being able to go on the road and beating the Bears as handily as they did. But at the same time, I mean, I always hate a division home team that is an underdog in a division game. So, I mean, the Niners are actually in a decent spot, and I wouldn't touch that at all until we find out what's going on with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, and you know what? Devin, I want your thoughts on this too in a minute, but that reminds me, Jim, it has been a long weekend, and I even forgot how it started. Maybe this is recency bias. Thursday Night Football was the worst freaking beat of at least this season and of several years for me. We talked about it on At the Book on Thursday. I had the over 50.5 for Arizona and Green Bay. That was my favorite bet of that game. I actually agreed with you. You picked the Packers straight up. I thought they had a good chance to win that game. I was a little bit scared, though, to take the points. I thought, hey, if anything, both of these teams, I even said this on Thursday, both of these teams, Devin, put the camera on me because people need to see the emotion in my face right now. There was no way that game was going to go under 50.5. And even after a slow start, I was texting you, Jim, the Packers decided they had a minute and a half left in the first half and just ran out the clock. What the hell are you doing? This is the NFL. You got to go at least try to get a field goal. They didn't get it. Okay, didn't get it. But the touchdown started flying in the second half. The game was going exactly how I thought it was going to go. Okay, I'm going to start the weekend good. I had a bad weekend. I'm going to cash some bets. Here we go. It's 24-21. We're at 45. I just need one more touchdown. Packers go right down the field. Aaron Jones scores a touchdown. All right, got it with 6 minutes to spare. Nope, got a review. Okay, it's a review. This is indisputable evidence that Aaron Jones didn't get in the end zone. What?
Have you ever seen a call like that overturned? Ever?
It was not. And so I thought, okay, well, that was stupid, but it was still only first down. It's 2nd and goal. They'll still get in. Oh, flag, false start on Green Bay. Now we're at the 6. We don't get in. Instead of kicking the field goal, we decide to go for it. We don't get it. What the hell is going on here? Okay, well, the Cardinals could still go down and score. The Cardinals go right down the field and get inside the 10-yard line. Hey, listen, it's the last minute. They might kick the field goal here, but I'm okay. I have 50.5. It can go to overtime at 24-24. Somebody's going to at least kick another field goal, and I win. Perfect. And if they score a touchdown here, great. Instead, the receiver doesn't look around, doesn't turn around, and Kyler Murray throws a pick that is like the most acrobatic juggling interception in the corner of the. What are we doing here? I almost woke my kids up.
I did wake mine up because that was like a $90 turnaround in big bucks right there. If Arizona gets the touchdown there, you get the over, I lose my money line bet, and so I'm just saying somebody's getting closer to somebody.
I'm a nice guy. I would have preferred that we both would have won there, Jim. I would have taken the Packers win, but and this is, I didn't even tell you this on Thursday night. I also at halftime when the Cardinals were down, I put a little juice on the Cardinals. I think it was -3.5 for the second half. So all they had to do was win the game because they were down 3 at halftime. And so I lost both bets when I had a lot more on the over. And so I would have been happy if the Packers had won the game and the over hit. I'd have been fine. But what are you doing? How does this happen on both ends of the field in the last 5 minutes of the game? You can't possibly get screwed worse than that.
I'd have been okay with us. I'd have been okay with us both winning, but I've just finished watching the Squid Game. So look, there's only one winner, buddy. And if somebody's getting the bullet, it's going to be you.
I have to point this out in that case. Then you ain't that close to me. We'll talk about big bucks totals on Thursday, but you're not that closer. You couldn't get a whole lot farther away. So I still got a decent cushion.
Let's just say it was about a $600 spread about 3 weeks ago, and I think if my math is correct, it's somewhere under 200 now.
Is it that? See, I was thinking it was like between 200 and 300, but maybe it's getting closer than I thought. It's okay. Listen. After that, I'm due about 17 lucky breaks, and then I also had North Carolina plus 3.5 against Notre Dame on Saturday, and they get inside the 10 in the end, and they're down by 10. But if they score a touchdown, I'm going to cover the bet. I thought, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to go in through the back door one time. One time I can get a bet. No, of course not. They get sacked, and that's the end of the game. And it's. Oh, this is what you were going through.
We could both just be as good as Devin and not have to go in back doors because he's winning games. It doesn't make a difference. I was so happy. I beat him by $1 2 weeks ago, and I think last week I beat him by $3. And I thought I had a great week. And I look and I'm like, oh, I beat him by $3. Jesus, come on.
You notice how Devin's staying out of this conversation because he knows.
Yeah, because he just keeps winning.
He's sitting on the throne up there, man.
All I know this: if his big bucks were real bucks, he could probably go buy a Bitcoin.
Now we want him to.
He would.
We want him to be able to keep. We want him to be able to have to still work for a living instead of like we like him in this job, so we don't want him to be so rich he just quits and moves to Tahiti and bets on sports all day. So Devin, slow down for us, brother, just for a little while. But in all seriousness, give us your thoughts on the NFL slate to come, because I know I completely cut you off, but I had to get that off my chest.
Yeah, I'll put him back up here. I think the one that stands out to me is the Chiefs as favorites. And I know what they have. I know who they have at quarterback. And also we don't know what the status of Devontae Adams is at this point, and if he'll be ready to play by the time Sunday rolls around. But based on how these two teams look, I don't know if the Chiefs should be favorites in this game. And I know that they could get rolling. They could beat the Giants by a couple touchdowns tonight and get everyone back on their side. But I don't know. I think this line probably moves down to the 2.5, maybe 2 area before game time, depending on what happens with Devontae Adams. But I think the Packers should be favorites here. But we'll see what happens with that game. But that was the one that stood out to me most. And then obviously the Titans-Rams line is due with Derrick Henry, being hurt and potentially out for the season. But back to the Saints and Falcons. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The word is, and I don't know if it's true or not. I just got a text that says that the Titans have signed Adrian Peterson.
Wow.
So that would be an interesting development.
Man, if Adrian Peterson can come back, so can Drew Brees. It's been longer for Peterson.
Yeah, he didn't sound like he was real interested in playing football last night.
No, he didn't.
But if they can get anything out of it, look, they still have Julio Jones, and they still have AJ Brown, and they still have Ryan Tannehill, and they. Look, Derrick Henry's outstanding, but I told this to a friend yesterday. I have him in fantasy football, so of course, I'm upset about it. But I went back and looked at my, and we do it's a lot lower scoring league than most. I was 7-0 coming into the week. I'm going to lose this week, it looks like. But if you would have given Derrick Henry a 0 for my team every week, I'd still be 6-1. I'm not talking smack. I'm just saying that just because you take one stud out of a game, I always think we go way too far with these point spreads when a certain player is gone. They're still a really good football team, and I still give them a chance to make the Super Bowl without him. They're
yeah, I don't know. If that Rams line really did move 3 points, of course, I suppose it moved 3 points. The Derrick Henry news and the Rams got Von Miller,
that's
so
right.
That's a double whammy there. So that is fair. But I agree with you. They're not a completely one-man team, but it's pretty gutting news there for Tennessee. Hey, we want to remind you before we go, you can sign up for the Caesar Sportsbook app. Betting has started in the state of Louisiana. The mobile betting is coming probably in a month or so. We don't have official words yet, but we want you to be ready. And so go to NOLA.com/Caesars. Get a $100 free bet bonus when you register your app before mobile betting launch. And you can actually get an even bigger bonus if you deposit some money before launch. And so we want you to get that bonus. So go to NOLA.com/Caesars. Hey, our thanks to Trey Wingo for coming on, the Chief Trends Officer for Caesars Sportsbook. And man, it was a heck of a weekend. Had a lot of fun today. I know we've been on here for a long time, but we also want to remind you, listen to Jim Derry's Datitude podcast. A lot more talk about the Saints and Bucks and what the Saints do moving forward at quarterback. And then tomorrow we'll have the Fantasy Roundup show with myself and Spencer Urquhart. It's also NFL trade deadline day tomorrow. So if there is a trade, the Saints want to trade for a receiver or, dare I say, a quarterback, tomorrow would have to be the day. Cam Newton would be separate from that. That's a free agency thing because he's not with a team, so they could sign him later. But tomorrow is trade deadline day, so it'll be interesting. And then on Thursday, the three of us will be back with you for At the Book, where we preview Week 9 in the NFL and Week 10 of college football season. So for Jim Derry and our producer, Devin Jackson, thanks again to Trey Wingo for joining us today. I'm Zach Ewing. This has been Odds and Ends.